So, we talked about direct objects in our previous video. Now we're going to talk about indirect objects. These are still objects of the verb, which means they still have to be in sentences with action verbs. The indirect object tells to or for who, to or for what the action is done. So the indirect object is also going to be a noun or pronoun. Always has to come with a direct object. You can't have an indirect object in a sentence unless you also have a direct object. It answers to whom or what, or for whom or what. So let's look at an example. Melly read us her report. So the subject is Melly, the predicate is read. She read us what? Her report, so that's the direct object. And she read the report to whom? Us. That is the indirect object. So it's like 4 steps. You find the subject, then the verb. You ask yourself, she read what? The report. To whom? To us. That's how you find the indirect object. So find the direct and indirect object here. The principal sent the teachers an email about homecoming week. So principal is the subject, sent is the predicate. The principal sent what? An email. That is the direct object. The principal sent the email to whom? To the teachers. So email is the direct object. Teachers is the indirect object. The hailstorm brought our crops damage. So hailstorm is the subject, brought is the verb. The hailstorm brought what? Damage. So damage is the direct object. The hailstorm brought damage to what? Our crops. So crops is the indirect object. Just like everything else, the indirect object cannot be inside a prepositional phrase. So the example from the first slide, Melly read us her report, has us as the indirect object because it tells to whom she read the report. On the other hand, if you said Melly read her report to us is a prepositional phrase. So this sentence has no direct object. If what you think is the direct object comes right after the word to or right after the word for, it's not actually going to be an indirect object because that is a prepositional phrase. So keep that in mind. Does this sentence have an indirect object? I gave my purse to Lexi while I went to the bathroom. So we've got the subject I, the verb gave. I gave what? My purse. So purse is the direct object. Then we have to Lexi. Because of this word to, Lexi is not an indirect object. How about I brought water for the flowers? I is the subject, brought is the predicate. I brought what? Water. So water is the direct object. And then we've got for the flowers. Flowers, again, cannot be an indirect object because it's in this prepositional phrase that starts with for. If it comes after the word to or for, it cannot be an indirect object. So this one is no as well. I brought the flowers water, on the other hand. We've got the subject I, the verb brought. I brought what? Water. So that's the direct object. I brought the water to what or for what? The flowers. So this one is a yes because there's not a to or for in front of that word flowers. So let's look at them together. Find the direct and indirect object. During the game of fetch, my dog brought me his tennis ball repeatedly. So the subject is dog. The predicate is brought. The dog brought what? Ball. So ball is the direct object. The dog brought the ball to who? Me. So me is the indirect object. Parasol ants raise their own crop of mushrooms. So our subject is ants, our verb is raise. The ants raise what? A crop. So crop is the direct object, and there is no indirect object here because they raise their crop to whom or to what? That question isn't really answered. It doesn't really make sense. So there's no indirect object in this sentence. The class elected 6 students to serve on student council. So the class is the subject, elected is the predicate. The class elected what? Students. So students will be your direct object. And again,